Welcome. Gio and I are both in Northern California today, and we are with Philippe Houdard, who is the CEO and co-founder of Pipeline Workspaces in the Florida area. I was just asking Philippe, where has he been? How did we not know him until now? So he's in trouble because we've outed him. So Philippe, you're gonna start seeing more of the co-working industry than you'd like, probably. Okay, I was looking at your LinkedIn. This is usually Gio's question, but how did this happen? You have a master's in public policy, you did some banking, you did a lot of different things, and then the workspace industry. So give us the story.
Well, as these things go, I just happened into it. It's true. My background is a little bit eclectic. I started out working on Capitol Hill and politics, did that for a few years. And then after graduate school, I got involved in technology and worked for what was at the time known as Lucent and now is Nokia. And then started working for a few other technology companies and then decided to become an entrepreneur. My business partner and I were involved in another company. We were looking for office space, and we just kept roaming around looking at different options, and nothing looked interesting, nothing looked inspiring. And this was in 2012, and we heard little rumbles of the concept, and we decided to create a space really for ourselves. And that was the genesis of it.
Wait, what did the first location look like? And where was
Well,
it?
that's where I'm sitting right now. It's Pipeline Brickell. Brickell is the downtown area of Miami.
Okay.
And what does that look like? It's, I would say, modern. We really took a look at a lot of the boutique hotels and South Beach and Miami Beach to try to gain some inspiration on what might be appealing, and hired Gensler and collaborated on a lot of different ideas. And, here it is.
You went straight for Gensler in 2012.
We did, they gave us a couple of good ideas, but there
Mostly
were, I
not, is my
guess,
guess. They
well, look, no, they were great, and they continue being partners, and they continue being partners with us now.
Okay.
But it's true that we pushed the envelope quite a bit, and I think it was just a great collaboration. The more traditional approach that they were bringing at the time, and what we wanted to make a little bit edgier. And for them, it was a great opportunity because they thought, well, this is great because this is exactly what we need to push into a new direction. And so
Yeah.
the collaboration was great.
Yeah. I mean, 2012 was still fairly early. I started in Chicago in 2012.
Oh,
But the thing about the designers at the time is they didn't understand the business model.
right.
Right. That's the only, the caveat. So you must have pushed them. You must have understood it well enough to kind of push them on the design, or not. But you're still in space, so I'm guessing it's serving you well.
Well, it worked out. We learned quite a bit from the first experience, and with each subsequent new location, we continued to evolve and make much better use of the space. And so here in this location, at the time, we have it's about 14,000 square feet, and we only had 23 offices.
Oh no.
And, you know, so we had something to learn.
Yeah.
And the
Right. But
next
I
one,
blame Gensler for that too, because somebody should have known,
yes,
that's not,
yes.
yeah. Wait, do you still only have 23 offices, or did you?
No, we've added about 20 new offices.
Yeah.
We actually did that during the pandemic. And so now we've got about 45 offices here on the
Okay.
same floor
Much
space.
better P&L.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Good. Okay.
And I'm being quiet because I actually cheated, Jamie. I was actually there last week.
Yeah.
So I got to tour it,
Yeah.
and I know some of the story already. And so I'm going to let you be extra surprised on some of it. But you get off the elevator, and there's a King's Guard right off the elevator. And
There's a
then you
what?
walk into a King's from British Guard with the big old hat and everything. Not a real
Really?
one, obviously. And then you walk in the lobby, and there's a red phone booth.
Fun. I love
Yeah.
the photo on the
Really
website.
cool
It's
space.
like professional, but a little, I don't even know. What do you call your aesthetic?
We don't really, high design. I don't know. The idea is to make it both professional and fun, and just to create an environment where people feel good when they come in. And so, yeah, we try to be playful in some areas, always while trying to cater to what people really come to Pipeline for, which is to work in an inspired space, but that's professional.
Yeah.
Our membership, I think, skews perhaps a little bit older than some of the other locations that I'm familiar with. I think the mean age is about 40. It's not ancient by any stretch, of course,
I
but
hope not. Yeah.
yes, me neither. And I think, that was one of the things. And initially, when the whole excitement was around co-working as being a great place for, coders with hoodies
Yeah.
and all, our concept was that it just, we just had a sense that this was going to be for professionals and mainstream companies as well. And one of our first members was Google. And we since, fortunately, were able to attract a lot of brand name companies ranging from Kayak to Spotify to Disney and HBO and just a whole list of companies. But the vast majority of our members are, the companies you've never heard of. They're smaller companies that are growing and striving and come here every day. And so it's been a real blend. But yeah, so we've always tried to cater to a little bit more of a professional membership.
And are you and your business partner still together?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm gonna have breakfast with him tomorrow morning.
Okay, nice.
Mm.
You never
And that's-
know.
Yes. Well, having the right partnership is so crucial when you start a business together, and having shared values and a common sense of how to work together is just paramount in order for the venture to get off the ground and then survive. So Todd and I knew each other before, and I happen to have a foundation that does work in Latin America, and I brought him on a trip to Colombia, and we were we took a Jeep and we were going halfway across the country, and we just got to know each other on a different level. And I think we figured if we could survive that experience together and still get along,
Yeah.
that we'd be prepared to face all the other challenges together we'd encounter in the future.
Well, I think a really cool part, you talked about the foundation. So let's kind of tap into that. And I've got a couple other questions, but you kind of want to talk about what the foundation is and what your goals are. Because that actually also leads into kind of how you ended up in this business with your, French background and kind of understanding community and how people do life, if you will. So you want to kind of talk about the foundation and kind of what the goal is of it?
Yeah, sure. So 2006, I started Developing Minds Foundation. And the concept is to build schools and support education projects, innovative education projects in areas affected by conflict. So in Colombia, we work with former child soldiers, kids that formerly were with the FARC and ELN and the guerrilla groups, as well as the paramilitary groups. And in Rio, we work in the favelas, which are very violent neighborhoods. The concept for me was really inspired. So you can't tell because I don't have an accent when I speak English, but my mother's American, my father's French. I was born in a really small village in northern France, and that's where I spent my early childhood. And this happens to be an area that was very much affected by war for an entire century. My grandparents grew up in World War I. They were children during World War I, and then when World War II came up, my grandfather was in a tank on the border with Germany trying to resist the Nazi invasion, and he was taken prisoner of war. And he was escaped with the help of my grandmother and came back. Then my father was raised during the occupation years, and then he was in the military. So there was conflict everywhere. And I grew up hearing all of these stories and revered my grandparents and my father and all the people in our village, tiny village, 300 people. And for me, I just kind of always had this idea in mind to try to make some sort of contribution that would help people that were facing similar circumstances to that which my family endured. And so that was the inspiration for that.
Jamie's like, what do I say?
Well, look,
You had a list of questions. No, it's
turned
an amazing story.
But what I'll say about that and how that ties to Pipeline is that I really love this village that I grew up in, and it's really an extraordinary place where, as tiny as it was incredibly vibrant. There were 3 cafes and a butcher shop and the boulangerie where you buy the bread and the little public school. And my mom taught catechism. And on Sundays, when the church bells rang, everybody in the village would walk together to church and then walk back. And it was just a deeply, deeply connected community. And so that has been something that has always resonated and is really important to me. And co-working is really a manifestation of that. It's just, in a different form, obviously, but this concept of being connected with one another and to grow together and deal with hardships together and deal with the sort of excitement of life. I think that's why this business concept really appealed to me. And then to try to implement that here it's awesome. I love the business.
Well, I think something that I experienced. So Jamie, he wasn't under the radar. He just wasn't. We tried to connect previously. So Kurt, the connector of all connectors, put us together maybe about a year ago ish. And so I went by their Fort Lauderdale location.
Okay.
Oh no, sorry, I was in Orlando. I went by the Orlando location when I was out there. And it was actually longer than a year ago because it was still COVID, right? And so the team was extremely hospitable, but also very careful as to how they were interacting and how their members were and protecting them and all that kind of stuff. But I still remember one of the things that stood out was, there was something on the desk or something about what are you grateful for, or, just trying to be positive about the situation, even though we were all still wearing masks and trying to figure out what was going on in the world. But one of the things that he shared was his passion for his staff, right? And just how important it is to find the right people because they're who take care of the members. So Philippe, you do want to talk about that and kind of what your take is on culture and everything else?
Yeah, sure. As a lot of in the early days, a lot of competitors would come and take a look at our space. And I think at the very beginning, we were a little bit sensitive and trying to block people from coming in. And I just quickly came to realize that was a fool's errand. Like, who cares? Anybody can copy the space, but what really matters is how we run it, what type of people we have, how they engage with the membership. And that is the most important thing that we do. The hiring process, without, I think, sort of exaggerating, is to just say no to almost anybody who applies for a job with Pipeline. We try to create this really high wall around the castle, and to scale the wall, you got to be pretty exceptional. So the members of our team are great. We hire for something that I think is non-traditional, probably looking for people that are a little bit diamond in a rough. I really don't care at all about the credentials. I don't care whether they went to college or not. I don't care. I'm just more concerned about the potential. And about 10 years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I had lunch with a guy who was an interrogator in the Army, and he was, I guess, partially or largely responsible for discovering Saddam Hussein in hiding. And he was such a unique character because he had no background in this before getting hired and being deployed out in Baghdad or Tikrit or wherever he was. But I asked him about his approach to interrogation, and I've since adopted it in how I interview. He basically was all over the map, and he was trying to take people off of their canned and tightly controlled message. And so he'd ask them about, political questions, and he'd ask them about fishing in the pond, and then he'd ask them about the family, and then he'd ask, and the people were just, you just got a raw sense of who they were, and that's the way he was able to extricate the information. Who are you, and what do you have to share? And that's the way that we try to do it when we interview people. And yeah, we have great. We don't get it right all the time, but I would say that's one of the areas that we probably get it right much more often than not.
He reminds me a little bit of Javier. Have you met Javier from iOS?
I have not. No.
Just the hospitality level. And actually, that meeting I was in with some enterprise occupiers, there was one in there who's like, she basically said she was sometimes not so impressed with the hospitality in a location. And they joined iOS, and she said it like knocked her socks off, the level of, hospitality and engagement from from the team. So on a related note, and Javier also attracts enterprise customers, which is not that typical. You have 7 locations, which is great, but it's not, you're not a, national brand. What is it about kind of your culture or your sales process to back up that attracts the Googles, et cetera?
Well, I think, first of all, it helps to be in South Florida, which is, I mean,
Lucky you.
yes, while many areas of the country struggled during 2000 and 2000, I guess, 21, 22. I mean, we did too, frankly, but it wasn't as bad. A lot of companies were moved here to South Florida, but even, attracting these types of members predates all of that. I think the space, first of all, the design of the space, but so yes, when we hire people, we're looking for somebody who has the certain polish and professionalism. And importantly, that this is a person who can navigate the type of environment that those types of companies expect. And that's one of the things during the interview process, my hope is that when they emerge from that meeting, they're just like, they don't know what just happened to them. Because what I'd like to evaluate is, how do they deal with conflict? How do they deal when they're pushed around a little bit? And, I'm gingerly in the way that I do it, but nonetheless, poking and prodding and kind of throwing curveballs. It's to see, is this person able to resolve conflict in a way that results in a relationship actually emerging stronger? Or like, wow, that was uncomfortable, but that person really showed me a tremendous amount of respect. And they were really trying to get us to a better place. And so for us, when we're either dealing with the sales process or, the standard tactical issues that you have in this type of business, dealing with collections, or somebody's doing something that's a little bit irking
Walking around the space
neighbor.
with no shoes on.
No shoes on, dropping F-bombs, trying to close deals,
in the hallway, right?
Yes, in the zone. We have to have our people, we all have to have these types of conversations. They're uncomfortable and people get a little bit nervous when they first have to learn how to do that. But the whole thing is just to allow that person to preserve their dignity, give them the necessary respect, give it to them straight, and guide it to the solution. If they're able to do that, and if we're able to do that, I think it's reflective of an overall approach of professionalism and yes, hospitality, because that is ultimately the service that we're offering.
So, first question, and we didn't get into these the other day on purpose.
I know Gio said he had to cut himself off. He was like, we got to save it for the podcast.
So you've got 2 young children, right? One of them's about to start school. So what is it about being a parent that has filled, because when we talked about your kids the other day, it's like you lit up in a way that professionally, obviously you're passionate, but your family does a totally different thing. So what is it about having young children that gets you up every day and gets you excited?
Oh, it's the greatest thing ever. It's also the hardest thing ever. And it's a weighty responsibility. And I think perhaps like some other people, I stepped into the role completely unprepared. You got a little taste of how I opened up this discussion. Where I come from, there was like 15th century fatherhood. I loved my father, my grandparents. I loved, all these people that were in my life. And yet that was from a different era altogether. And now something different is called upon fathers. And when I stepped into that role, I quickly realized that I had a lot to learn. And this all happened during COVID. My first son, Francois, was born in August of 2019, so 6 months before COVID struck in earnest. And then Jean-Paul, my second son, was born in March of 2021. So they were just definitely COVID babies. I found myself with no real model of what it meant to be a father in this day and age. And it's very different with what's required, I think, today than was a generation or 2 ago. And so I turned to scientific literature for guidance because I had nowhere else to turn to. And what I learned was that these first 3 years of life were really absolutely crucial. and setting a child up and the development of the brain and character and everything else that's important for the future. And so the first 3 years of my children's lives have really pulled from me an enormous amount of attention and focus. So that has been really important to me.
And how is it? I mean, culturally, obviously, as you shared, you're French. Your dad was French, your mom was American, your wife is Colombian,
Colombian,
right?
yes.
Ah,
So that there's a lot of
interesting.
passion and flair there. So
It's a clash of civilizations. It's in our so yeah. So I speak French to my children. My wife speaks Spanish to them. She and I speak mostly English to one another. They speak back in whatever language they feel like it. Usually, whichever one I don't, like, no, you're supposed. I'd like you to speak French. It's like the Tower of Babel over there. But somehow it all works fluidly. I don't know how, but nobody's trying to figure out what somebody else is saying, and everybody understands. And it's great. And my hope is to prepare them for an uncertain world. Look, I'm super excited about the future, and I'm also filled with trepidation. It's just like everything is changing, and it's so hard to know what we ourselves, even as adults, but especially for children, what we're going to need in the future. And so I'm just trying to focus on the real sort of basics. The good news for me is that my children are incredibly disobedient. And so I think they have that sort of inherent entrepreneurial spirit, which, while I may lament that they're not obedient and don't follow my rules, I try to convince myself that it's actually good news, that even though it's driving me nuts right now, yes, once they emerge as adults, that they'll be prepared to deal with whatever kind of world we live in then.
My daughter
Well,
is 12, and she asked me this weekend, I think, she said, was grandma a good mom? Like my mom. And
Yes.
I was like, well, I think so. And I was like, there was no iPad, and there's no social media. I also grew up in a really small town, more cows than humans. So there just was there was a lot of parenting stuff that you didn't deal with, right? If you got the basics down, you were probably doing fine. And today it's just really complex to navigate all the forces, in the world that you kind of have to figure out how to do the right way, or right. There is no handbook.
There's no handbook, and there's so many competing models and complex information, so many different ways of doing it that you actually have to try to sort through it. Whereas in the past, you just did what everybody else did. And so my first son is now 4, and my mom tells a story of when I was maybe not an infant, but maybe like a year old or something. And my father came in. This was in France on the farm. And he saw how much she was enjoying kind of like mollycoddling me. And he's like, well, that's great. But remember, once he's 4, he's mine. And, at that point is when you start working. So I tried to apply that with my son. I brought him into Pipeline the other day, tried to get him to fluff the pillows. He wasn't having it. It's not
Here's how
going
you
nearly.
do it, like a karate chop.
Yeah. Hey, karate chop in the middle. If there's lint, trying to pick it. Nah, he's like, nah.
I love it.
that's awesome.
It's a different world now.
Well, yeah, I mean, children are so overstimulated, right? I mean, Jamie you and I briefly discussed this last night over dinner. It's crazy because it's sensory overload. I mean, you've got everything of technology you can imagine. Parents just hand kids iPads or iPhones to keep them, their mouths shut at lunch or dinner or at home or whatever the case is. And less kids are outside playing. I mean, and so, I mean, I just think there's so many different things that are obstacles today that didn't exist back then, right?
I think that's exactly right. I think, so in our house, we don't have a television. I actually I haven't owned a television in, probably 20 years, but we try to keep the kids, we did no screens at all for this first several years. And I've got no standing to tell people how to do it. And if somebody comes to our house, they're like, yeah, okay, great. Let me take note to do the opposite of what you're doing. But I try to be very conscientious about not telling people. But for us, that's been something that's important. Trying to have the kids spend as much time outside as possible is important. And importantly, as a parent now, you have so much pressure to be risk averse, lest you be stigmatized as being this horrible parent who's not really protecting your child. But as part of my readings, what I discovered is that the more that children are permitted to take risk, the better they are at actually managing risk and mitigating very serious risk, because they take the little steps, hopefully it's age appropriate, but they take little steps. They learn what happens when they take a misstep. And then the next time they calibrate and they're a little bit more careful. And so it's kind of this counterintuitive concept of permitting your kids to take more risk is actually the safest thing that you can do, as opposed to keep them inside. And it's similar to being an entrepreneur. You have to go out there, you get bruised up, you have a near-death experience, you pull yourself back up, you try it again, you get beat up all over again, you have another near-death experience, you keep going, and you develop that sort of resistance, that resilience. And so the way that the parenting can work, if you permit your kids to be out and about, hopefully that prepares them for real life, where you have to take your blows and keep going. So that's the way that at least I've tried to think about it.
So you have
And it's-
seven locations since 2012.
Yes.
Any near-death experiences along the way?
Well, yeah, you always you have such conviction that everything's going to be a huge success, and
You
that
have to,
sort of
right? Or
you
you'd never
have
do it.
to. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even bravado. You actually believe that. Fortunately, all 7 locations have got through COVID. That, of course, was the greatest threat. Remember probably in March of 2020 when we all got hit in the face with a frying pan, it felt like. I woke up maybe on that first or second night where the world just shut down, and I was like, our revenue is probably going to go down to zero. Not just like we're going to lose 20% of our, but it's going to go down to zero. I think for all of us who are in the business, that sort of recognition that our whole business was about being inside in close proximity with as many people as you can stuff in there and have them interact face to face. It was a pretty daunting realization when that was the complete opposite of what was being called for. But I think what helped us get through that is we had invested so heavily in the relationships with our members who stuck through with us. I remember waiting. We charge on the same day of every month for the upcoming, like I'm sure most people do. And the several weeks after the world shut down, and I was waiting at 4 o'clock in the morning, it shows up, and almost every single member had paid. I was just dumbstruck by this. I couldn't believe it. And then the next month, same. And then the month, same. And then it started going down a little bit.
And then it's at some point they're like,
and
oh,
then it's then
Yeah.
but we still managed, and we reached out to every single member. And if anybody, the direction that I gave to all of our general managers was that whatever it takes to keep them in the space and to keep them afloat and to help them in their greatest time of need, let's do it. We let one guy pay $1 a month to stay in a desk. It was just this concept of this is a time that was a test of character. It was a time where you were really called to account as to whether what you were saying was the truth. Do you really care deeply about your members? Are you willing to suffer alongside with them? And if so, maybe, we don't know, but maybe on the other side of this, you'll be able to grow back together. That's what ended up happening. We went through rough times, of course, but fortunately we've emerged on the other side, and everything's held together.
It's just so interesting how that's what, 15 years-ish No, not even that. 13, 14 years.
Yeah.
And so it's just the evolution of how business is done and what has changed, right? I mean, I was just in your space there at Brickell, and you just got done doing a, I guess, remodel slash making the space more efficient. I mean, Regis calls it space maxing it, right? As you maximize the space that you have. And I mean, office sizes have changed. And so, how did you end up at that conclusion that you needed to go in and do that? And then ultimately, did you go to the landlord and get additional funds from the landlord in order to do it? Did you come out of pocket? Did you do an extension? What did you do?
It was the time that our lease was about to come up for renewal. And so we went and renegotiated. We got a little bit of help for that. And then the rest we came out of pocket for. And we were happy to do it because we knew it was an investment for the future. Yeah, I think it's always trying to question what's the maximum space utilization that does not compromise on the feel of it. How do you not return to this feel of being just a bunch of private offices? I mean, that's not really what the business is about. And so that decision came at the same time that there was quite a bit of discussion about Miami being an emerging city for tech companies to gravitate to and finance companies from New York. And so we've had a lot of people that came from Silicon Valley and Los Angeles and elsewhere that came here, as well as people from Europe and Latin America. So we could kind of see what the trajectory was. And like with all of these things, you just kind of take a little bit of a risk, but it's not a blind risk. We could kind of look at the data and really be able to project out.
How did you end up in Philly?
My business partner and I were heading up to New York. This was after we had our first location. New York seemed like the center of the universe for co-working spaces. And we took a detour because my business partner, Todd, had gone to school in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And met with the owner of a building. It's a building that's right across from City Hall. It's got an extraordinary sweeping view of the city. And
This sounds emotional, just saying.
well,
Gio
no,
would be telling you not to get emotionally involved with the building at this point.
I tell you what, they're great guys and well known and very well respected in the city. And that really helped because in Philly, it really helps if you're a local. In a lot of cities, it doesn't matter, but there are certain cities where it does matter. Philly
like Miami is such a melting pot that is anybody from Miami, but Philly,
yeah, it helps, and it might even be absolutely necessary. So that's how because we wanted to show that we could manage somewhere beyond just our own backyard. So that was our second location. Then we came back to Florida and we just expanded.
In Florida.
Florida.
Was that a lease or a management deal?
All leases. We haven't done any management deals. We possibly be open to it. We're not super excited about it. We're not out looking for it. Similar to our hiring practices, we try to say no to almost everything. We get approached so often by people that want to bring us into their buildings. And it's just got to be really exciting for us to actually say yes.
And what's the environment like for expansion? Are you looking for additional locations, or Miami, or the Florida market is?
The Florida market's hot, continues to be. The cities, we really started with the concept of the hub and spoke model, where we'd have in downtown location, the main one like here in Brickell, downtown Miami, and then in the not necessarily doesn't have to be suburban, but the other centers that make sense where there's enough density and concentration, particularly if there's some growth in residential, their towers going up, then all of a sudden that becomes interesting to us. And so we did that here. And so we're also in Orlando and Tampa, both cities that are also growing at a very swift pace. They're great cities. And so as we take a look, unless we do something that's really opportunistic, you get approached and you take a look and you quickly determine whether it makes sense or not. But otherwise, we'll take a look at those cities and look at expansion around there.
What is your typical floor plate today? Is it still roughly 14,000?
That's what we feel most comfortable with.
Yeah.
We've always.
I like it. For what it's worth.
Me too.
I was like, oh, you got that right. Yeah.
Me too. And that we really tried to stay disciplined in our growth. And I think that's why we survived through COVID and some of the others unfortunately didn't, is that you get so excited and you're so eager and you want to grow and you want to grow more quickly and more aggressively and all that. But sometimes it does help to have another voice that's putting the brake on so you're not doing it too quickly.
Yeah.
We've tried to really grow conservatively, which didn't always feel great, but I think so far has been the right decision because it really focuses our attention on running the business really well. We're about profitability. We were never one of these companies that were about, hey, let's just plow everything we have to into the growth, take some risk, and it'll. No, we're always
It'll work out sometime in the future with
Yeah.
enough dots on the map.
Exactly. And we've seen some well-known companies that where, didn't work out so well. I think for us, it's about let's make sure each location is profitable. That is always the focus because we've raised money from our very close friends. They mean a lot to us, what the commitments we make to them, or at least, everybody knows what investment is all about and there's some risk involved, but we try to work really hard for our investors.
So what are you most excited about 2024, personally and professionally?
I think there's so much people, so many people feel distressed out here in the world. There's an election year, the world, the body politic is polarized. People are freaked out, either excited or freaked out about AI. There's stuff going on in the Middle East. There's stuff going on in Ukraine. Everywhere you take, there's climate. I think so many people feel really distressed. And I see that Pipeline can serve as a sort of refuge for people. Of course, it's a workplace, but it's also a place where you can experience a sense of well-being if we do our job right. And the mission remains the same as it always has been. And you can ask any employee at Pipeline, it's to help others be successful. And if we can create an environment for people to not be out on their own or working in isolation, but to have a place where they see some friendly faces, where they can build some friendships, maybe they can build some business relationships, then they can feel a little bit better. It's just like the village where I grew up in. People were deeply, deeply connected. And there was very, very little sense of isolation or alienation or solitude. And so I'm excited about continuing to create a place where that exists. Yes, also creating that for our employees, for them to love working at Pipeline. We have a lot of our employees who have been here for many, many years. We're a small company. We have 7 locations, and we try to run the operation in a way that's very lean. We try to, at the beginning, people are they're like significantly micromanaged, like the opposite of what you're supposed to do probably, but it's a way of inculcating them with the deep values of Pipeline and also teaching them the knowledge, because a lot of times when we're hiring, we're not hiring for technical skills. So we have to get all of that out of the way. But then we have a tremendous amount of trust that they'll be able to operate well. And so we have a distributed decision-making process where they have a lot of latitude to make decisions and to drive the location and to feel that they own it. Of course, with the oversight, and we have all kinds of mechanisms in place to ensure that that's the case. But so what I'm excited about is continuing to have an environment for our employees to grow and to love working here, and then to turn around and be able to create that for our members. And
It's
then on the personal, yeah,
okay, there you go.
So,
Okay, you're tracking.
Gio, look, yes, I appreciate the fact that you actually paid attention to this. Yes, my son Jean-Paul started school first day of school yesterday. So far, so good. My 2 little ones, there's a serious issue of sibling rivalry that I'm contending with always, but I was just absolutely delighted, and it warmed my heart that the older brother, Francois, said that he was going to take care of little Jean-Paul when he was at school, when it's a little Montessori school. There are two classrooms right next to each other. he said he wouldn't play with any other kids. He would just play with Jean-Paul. So I found that to be incredibly sweet and I love that. So on the personal front, it's about that, as well as continuing to just kind of do, I think, I guess what most people make resolutions out of, stay healthy, work out, eat well, all of that.
So
I have a follow-up.
wise.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
My follow-up was going to be, what does your Colombian wife think about being married to an entrepreneur?
Good. I think for her, it's interesting because she and I actually come from a very similar background. She comes from a really small village, a couple of hours away from Colombia. I mean, from Medellin in Colombia. And her father raised cattle just the same way that my father did. And, it's not entrepreneurial the way that we think about entrepreneurs in this day and age and creating software and apps and this and that and taking risks and all that. But nonetheless, this concept of trying to build something, and that you drive and you're responsible for the outcomes. So I think she identifies with that, and I think it's something we have a lot of common ground on, and she's appreciative, and she is working just as hard as I am, but on the home front. And that's the way we decide to
Got the harder
do
job
things.
for sure.
Yeah, look, it's so hard, and she never
With two
stops.
boys. Here's the
Yes,
two boys.
yes.
I'm out. You good luck.
Two boys, very close in age, hyperkinetics.
Yeah.
She's got a tough job, but she does an amazing job.
Well, we'll give you some brownie points here. So what are your favorite things about your wife? If you were to pick 3.
Yeah, well, for starters, she wakes up with a smile on her face every single day. And that, to me, that optimism, which has to be nurtured and defended against, because some people are born with it, like my mom, who's just, she's probably the happiest person that I know. Even she, it has to be nourished, right? Because you go out and you have to deal with life and all the realities of life. And it's the same with my wife. She's got just this ability to really deal with everything that happened, kids swinging on the chandeliers, and all the throwing things. And she goes, she may be exhausted and sometimes a little bit forlorn and going to bed that night, but the next morning just waking up with that real excitement. Let's go. Tomorrow's going to be a better day. She's got a lot of other great qualities, but I would say that one is something that I have a deep admiration and appreciation for.
Certainly makes life a lot easier for you, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we really appreciate you taking time to have this recording with us and to hear more about your business and what you're seeing. You've been doing this for a while, so congratulations on all the success, and I'm excited to just continue to see how things evolve for you.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the interest. There's so much that I would have liked to have shared about our members, because that's what it's really all about. But I'll save that for the next time that we engage.
We'll do it again. Also, you have to come to the GWA conference. He has to meet Laurent.
One of my French compatriots.
Laurent is also French. They have 20 locations, kind of Bay Area. They've expanded a little bit recently. They're now in Phoenix and Vegas. But yeah, and Laurent's been doing this for 20 years, I think.
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
Maybe longer.
Yeah, he's French. I don't know where in France he's from.
Well,
we'll have to ask him.
I'll have to look him up. What's the name of the company?
Pacific Workspaces.
I'll send you a link.
Great.
Gio and I are going to have our strategy meeting there later today at one of the locations.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Yeah. So, yeah, lovely to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.